Hello, all. I realize that recently I've been doing a lot of book reviews, but I haven't been continuing with my review of bad 1980s science fiction movies, so I thought I'd go back to that for a bit. And I'm going to start with a film that's almost beyond description. It's a post-apocalyptic film noir comedy, and that's Albert Pyun's 1985 movie, Radioactive Dreams. Completely nutso movie that I really like. It's got has garnered a cult following, and I sort of understand why, even though it's actually kind of a bad movie. Pyun was somebody who worked on low budget, though this had a budget of $3 million, which was not something to laugh at in 1985. But it only made 1 million back, so it wasn't really a great success, despite the fact that it was released by a major studio, 20th Century, and backed by Dino De Laurentiis, no less. But it tells the story of World War III occurs in 1986 on April 1st, and every missile is launched except one. There's one left, and there are two young boys who are taken into a shelter by people that they call their fathers, but whether they are or not is sort of left up to you to decide. And they're put into this bomb shelter, and they live there for the next 15 years until Marlowe, who's the happier of the two, is played by Michael Dudikoff, tunnels out. And Philip, who is played by John Stockwell, is skeptical. He doesn't know what they're going to find. But they wanted the only reading matter they've had, and the only way they've learned anything is by reading like 1940s pulp detective novels. And so they want to go out and be private detectives. They want to be dicks, as Marlowe keeps saying to Phil's somewhat annoyance. But they decide they're going to go out and explore the world. There's a car in a garage that they find when Marlowe breaks through the ceiling out their shelter, and it's gassed up, so it's like a 1985 Buick LeSabre or something like that, and they're going to go out and explore this world and find out what's going on. And they run into a bunch of mutants. They meet a beautiful girl played by the gorgeous Lisa Blount, who was famous for being received an Academy Award nomination for An Officer and a Gentleman. Was also in a couple episodes of Moonlighting, and later became a producer who won a Oscar for directing a short movie, short film, and sadly died fairly young from a blood disease. But in this movie, they meet her. Her name is Miles Archer, which of course, is a reference to the Maltese Falcon. And she has these keys to the last nuclear missile, and all these alien mutants are after it. And they rescue her from a couple of these mutants. And she's kind of not really very pleased to see them. She goes off and she asks them to take her to a phone booth, and they do. And then she sort of disappears on them. While she steals Marlowe's gun while she's kissing him, which kind of drives him mad because he's never been kissed. And he falls head and over heels for her, but she steals his gun, but she drops the keys and doesn't realize it. Then she later disappears. They are attacked by these wild biker girl mutants who all have these red wigs, but they're actually bald and rather horrible looking. And for no apparent reason, they just attack the car. They yank one of the doors off with a big knife, and they blow up their trailer, which had all their gas in it. So now they're limited to what they've got in their tank, which isn't enough to get them to Edge City, which is apparently the closest civilization. And so they are still growing, and they run into another kind of a damsel in distress who turns out not to be, but named Rusty Mars. And again, that's a bit of a joke on The Big Sleep. Rusty Regan was seeing Eddie Mars' wife, so Rusty Mars. But they rescue her from what they call these disco mutants who dress exactly like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, but they're kids. They're actually kind of midgets. And they talk in expletives. Don't you better effing get out of the effing car. I'm going to effing blow your effing head off. you know, and they easily overpower them, take their guns away, and chase them off. They agree they're going to take this character, Rusty Mars, played by Michelle Little, to Edge City. She says we got to go because it's dangerous to be there at night. So there are mutations that lurk around, and you don't want to be there. So they agree, and they take her to Edge City. Marlowe has a very bright, positive outlook on life. He sees everything as an adventure. Phil is much more cynical. He doesn't trust things. He doesn't completely trust Rusty. He doesn't trust what's going on. They meet a couple of greasers who kind of trip them and act like jerks, and some kind of nasty people. There's a Marlowe is being his effusive self. He says hi, how are you to some girl. She tells him to F off, and gives him the finger. He thinks that's kind of he doesn't know. He thinks that's kind of a greeting sign. He gives it to her back. She slaps him in the face. He doesn't understand what's going on. Rusty takes Phil up to this loft where she's like attempting to seduce him, it seems, and then she like puts his hands behind his back and starts tying him up. He says, "I'm not used to this kind of thing." And then it turns out that they're in this place run by cannibals, and they're going to eat him unless he tells them where the keys are. And he does a little bit of sleight of hand. He like shows the keys, but he doesn't actually give them to him. He punches one of them in the stomach, and he manages to get away. And then they're basically, the rest of the movie is they're being chased by these various gangs, all of whom want these keys. There's the greasers. There's the kid gangsters, who they call disco mutants, and there's the cannibals, and there are also a couple of like lizard-like alien kind of creatures who are chasing them. There's some wild stuff in there. There's a monster that comes up out of the floor. It looks kind of like Godzilla, and then they escape that, and they somehow they find a package with like clothes with they've been stripped to their underwear at this point. They find a package with suits in it, and they while they're running away, they manage to put these suits on, and now they become jaded. They're not the innocent young guys that they were when they entered Edge City. One of the coolest things about this movie, I should mention, is the soundtrack. Got some terrific songs, most of them sung by LA punk rocker Sue Sad. And she performs a song called Guilty Pleasures live as a singer in the punk district of this town, Edge City. And over the action that's going on. She also sings the title track, Radioactive Dreams, which was also the name of her first album. Her band was called Sue Sad and the Next. I think in another video, as I said, it was Sue Sad and the Last, but it's not. It's Sue Sad and the Next was the name of her band. Very good singer. She sounds kind of like Pat Benatar if she swallowed razor blades. That's the best way I can describe her voice. But it's unique, and it's actually good. That's not a criticism. I really enjoy the soundtrack. The soundtrack was terrific. Particularly like the Radioactive Dreams, Guilty Pleasures, and a song called She's a Fire, which is about Miles Archer. Anyway, they are rescued from these various other gangs who are chasing them by one of the greasers, who says that Miles Archer hired him to find them. Then again, he demands the keys, which they won't give him. They punch him and run away. Miles corners them, and Phil sees a document that talks about these keys, and it turns out they're the keys to an MX missile. So now he knows what they're for, and he realizes he can't give them out to anybody. They're too dangerous. Miles demands the keys again. They get away from her, and their plot now is they put on these suits and their trench coats, and they're going to lure all the gangs into a warehouse and hope that they kill each other before they can kill them, which is basically the only strategy they can use to get away from all these varied gangs who are trying to get these keys. There's a chase, there's some gun battles, there's some great explosions and special effects. It turns out that the leaders of all these gangs, these two guys with kind of lizard-like faces, look like something out of the V, the miniseries, turn out to be the people who were their quote-unquote pops, the people who put them in the bomb shelter, one of whom is George Kennedy as a guy named Spade Chandler, and Don Murray as a guy named I think Don Hammer. So they're making fun of, again, just Philip Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, and Mickey Spillane too, with the name Hammer. And so again, they're confronted with this. They admit that they're really their pups, and they pull off these lizard heads. They're just masks. And George Kennedy says, how are you, kids? How are you doing? And Phil is still skeptical. He says, "Oh, you're not our pops. You just shoved us in that bomb shelter, and you were going to leave us there forever." And he doesn't really respond. But again, these gangs start attacking them, and they're trapped. Philip and Marlowe hide while the other gangs are shooting at each other and killing each other. And unfortunately, their pops are killed too, even after he surrenders the keys, which he has to take back ultimately. Now only Miles Archer and Rusty are left. Rusty tries to make up with Phil, but he won't have it because she betrayed him. She double crossed him and turned him over to the cannibals. And she says, but we were having such a good time. He says, well, that was a long time ago, and that was 1,000,000 years ago, and I got a short memory. In fact, I don't even remember who you are. That's a great line. So he's having none of this attempt to make up, even though she's changed into a pretty dress for him. She basically disappears, and then they're left to face Miles Archer, who still wants the keys and knows that they took him back. Well, she says, you don't have the guts to shoot me. And at first, Marlowe, who's still kind of smitten with her, won't. And she forces their hand by firing at them, and he just shoots at her in response. He's not actually trying to kill her, but he does. And then she's gone. Now they've got the keys. They go back to the city, and they're afraid that the gangs are still going to be after him, but they're not. Turns out they're not. They're kind of looked at as heroes because they got rid of the real bad guys. It was funny, the little disco aliens are eaten by that Godzilla kind of monster. It just comes out of the floor and goes, gobbles them up, which I thought was great. Some great humor on Pyun's part, in who he both wrote and directed the movie. This was only his second film. His first one was called The Sword and the Sorcerer, which is actually pretty decent, some decent fantasy. He also directed, I mentioned this on my review of Vicious Lips, a bunch of movies called the Cyborg movies, which were, again, fairly decent, but very low budget. The Nemesis series, which had Tim Thomerson in it, and Sue Lyon, a kind of an attractive blonde wrestler lady, and a bunch of other things. He directed a movie with Jill Ireland in it, which was a kind of a beach movie. And he'd do anything as long as it was cheap. And he didn't need a lot of sets and a lot of good acting because there really wasn't much. Some people have complained that they don't think that Philip and Marlowe are very sympathetic characters because we don't get to know a lot about them. We don't get their background. We don't get that information. I don't think that really matters. You got to take into account that this is a deliberate parody. It's not meant to be, a drama. It's a tongue-in-cheek attack on these kinds of movies, Mad Max and that kind of stuff. And if the sets are cheap and the warehouses all look pretty standard and neon signs are cheesy, I think that's intentional. And maybe that's that and the soundtrack, I think, are one of the things that makes this a cult classic. It's apparently not available on DVD except in a German edition that was limited to 1,000 copies. And that's a 2-disc set, which includes the entire soundtrack. The soundtrack that was released is actually missing this song that they do over their last dance, their post-nuke shuffle, as they call it, Zim Boom Zowie. That song's not on the soundtrack. And also the song that the Disco Mutants were listening to on their boombox when they discover Rusty Mars, that they've kidnapped, is not on the official soundtrack, but it is on this German soundtrack, apparently. So if you can find a copy of that, good luck. I think it's fun. It's a funny movie, and I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it.